I never imagined my own sister could destroy my life overnight. One morning, I woke up to cops knocking on my door. My sister had planted drugs in my room and called the police. My parents believed her without question. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Evan. I'm in my mid-20s, hardworking, and always tried to do right by my family. My sister, Lila, was jealous of everything I achieved. She always seemed sweet, but I now know she was scheming. My parents, Harold and June, always sided with her, thinking she was the innocent one. That morning, I felt my world crumble. I tried to explain, but my parents wouldn't listen. Lila smiled like she had won. I felt betrayed and alone. Friends were shocked, but most stayed quiet, unsure who to believe. I knew I couldn't react blindly. I had to be smart. I quietly started gathering proof, receipts, messages, and small details that showed Lila's lies. I got help from Moss, a trusted friend, to watch her movements. I also found a lawyer, Cruz, who guided me through the legal mess. After weeks of careful planning, I caught Lila red-handed trying to manipulate another situation. I showed the evidence to my parents and a neutral witness. Lila finally cracked. My name was cleared, and the police dropped all charges. My parents had to face the truth and realized their mistake. I moved forward, setting firm boundaries with Lila and rebuilding my life. I learned that betrayal hurts deeply, but patience and careful planning can bring justice. I didn't need anyone to validate me. Surviving this made me stronger and more determined to live life on my own terms. Growing up, I was really close to my parents. Harold and June always encouraged me to work hard and follow my goals. We had dinners together, shared small jokes, and I thought our family was solid. I always tried to help around the house, support my little sister, and make sure everything was okay. Lila, on the other hand, often seemed uneasy when I got praise or recognition. When I received a promotion at my first job, she smiled, but there was something in her eyes, like she wanted what I had or wished it was her instead. She would subtly remind our parents of her achievements, small things she thought would make her look better. I didn't notice at first, but later, I saw how often she compared herself to me. Even as a teenager, Lila had a way of twisting situations. If I got into trouble at school, she would make sure the story sounded worse for me, making herself look innocent. She had a talent for telling half-truths and leaving out details to get what she wanted. It was quiet at first, just little comments or actions that seemed harmless. But the pattern was there, always present. Despite this, I still trusted her and defended her when others hinted at her behavior. I thought family meant sticking together. But underneath her polite smile, Lila was learning how to manipulate. Every time I succeeded, her envy grew, even if no one else could see it. Looking back, these early signs were warning signals. The jealousy, the quiet plotting, the subtle lies, it all built up slowly. I just didn't know how far it would go, or how it would one day turn into a trap that could ruin my life. One night, I came home exhausted after a long shift, expecting a quiet evening. I had no idea that Lila had been inside my room earlier that day. She moved silently, like she knew exactly what she was doing. I would later discover she had slipped something dangerous into my drawer, something that could ruin me completely. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. Uniformed officers were there, looking serious. My heart sank instantly. They asked questions I couldn't answer. Lila stood behind them, calm and composed, pretending to be shocked and worried. But I could sense the satisfaction hidden behind her expression. I tried to explain, insisted that I didn't touch anything illegal, but the officers had the information she provided. She had sent an anonymous tip, crafting it carefully so it pointed straight at me. The details were convincing, and I realized immediately how deliberate her plan had been. Before I could gather my thoughts, my parents arrived. Instead of listening to me, they echoed her story. "We saw what she found," my father said. "This doesn't look good, Evan." I felt like the ground had vanished beneath me. My mother's eyes were filled with worry, for Lila, not me. I was stunned. Everything I had worked for, every good reputation I had built, was being questioned in an instant. The person I trusted most in my family had just become my worst enemy. Lila's smirk was subtle, but I noticed it, and it burned. I knew then that I couldn't rely on anyone at home. My own sister had crossed a line I never thought she would. That day marked the beginning of a nightmare. I felt trapped, betrayed, and completely alone. But somewhere deep inside, I realized I couldn't let her win. I couldn't believe what was happening. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it, but nothing added up. Every word my parents said felt like a punch. They looked at me with suspicion, not the love and trust one had known all my life. I couldn't understand how they could turn on me so quickly. Friends who heard the news called or texted, unsure what to think. Some hesitated, worried about choosing sides. I could feel the weight of doubt pressing down on me. People I once counted on were suddenly unsure, and it made the betrayal even worse. The worst part was the emptiness inside. I walked through my room, now tainted with someone else's lies, feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. Every corner reminded me of what had been stolen from me, my peace, my safety, my trust. I realized I was completely isolated, surrounded by people who should have supported me but were instead waiting for proof to decide if I was guilty. I tried to speak, to explain, but the words felt meaningless. My parents' eyes didn't soften, and Lila's quiet satisfaction was unbearable. I wanted to scream, to make them see the truth, but no sound came out. My heart ached in ways I had never felt before. It was in that silence that I felt the ground vanish beneath me. Everything familiar had shifted. The house that once felt like a home now seemed like a trap. My life, my reputation, everything I had built felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I was hurt, confused, and utterly alone, but deep down, a small spark of determination began to grow. I couldn't let this end here. I knew I couldn't let my anger control me. Yelling, pleading, or lashing out would only make me look guilty. I needed a plan, something careful and precise. I couldn't afford mistakes, not with my reputation on the line. I started thinking quietly, mapping out what I needed to prove. Every detail mattered: times, locations, receipts, anything that could show Lila's deception. I knew she would cover her tracks if I acted too soon, so patience became my weapon. I began watching patterns, noting when she left the house, what she said to people, and any moments that seemed suspicious. I realized I couldn't do this alone. That's when I reached out to Moss, someone I had trusted for years. He was a private investigator who believed in fairness and truth. Unlike anyone else, he didn't doubt me. I explained the situation carefully, and he agreed to help, quietly observing, collecting evidence, and advising on the best steps. Together, we created a strategy. Every move had to be subtle. I couldn't alert Lila or my parents to what we were doing, or the plan would fail. I learned to watch without reacting, to listen without giving away my thoughts, and to stay calm even when frustration bubbled inside me. For the first time since the accusations, I felt a sense of control. Instead of being the victim, I was becoming proactive. I knew this road wouldn't be easy, but with Moss's guidance and my careful planning, I had a chance to uncover the truth. I couldn't undo the pain Lila had caused, but I could make sure justice would be seen, and that I would finally be free of her manipulation. I began following every lead carefully, tracking Lila's movements without drawing attention. I noticed patterns in her daily routines, small habits she didn't think anyone paid attention to. Every step she took, every conversation she had, I recorded discreetly. Slowly, the puzzle started coming together. Receipts from shops she visited, notes she left carelessly, and messages she thought were private all added up. Each piece revealed her planning, the careful way she set everything up to make me look guilty. It wasn't just a random act, she had calculated it. I realized she might have been hoping to gain favor with our parents or even benefit from inheritance discussions. The thought made my stomach twist. I collected footage from cameras around the house and neighborhood, looking for anything that could expose her actions. Each clip, each timestamp, painted a clearer picture. Lila had orchestrated everything down to the smallest detail, and the realization hit me hard. I couldn't believe my own sister could be so ruthless. The emotional weight pressed down on me. Anger mixed with sorrow, betrayal with determination. Every discovery stung, but it also strengthened my resolve. I kept reminding myself that acting too soon could ruin my chance to clear my name. I had to be patient, careful, and thorough. With Moss's help, I documented everything meticulously. Every message, every suspicious movement, every tiny piece of evidence was catalogued. The closer I got to the truth, the more I understood how deep Lila's envy ran. It was shocking to see how far she was willing to go, but it also fueled me. I couldn't let her win. Justice had to come, and I was determined to make it happen. The day the police took me in was terrifying. I was handcuffed and led into a small room, surrounded by questions I had no easy way to answer. My heart pounded, but I stayed calm on the outside, knowing that any sign of panic could be used against me. That's when Cruz stepped in. He was a lawyer with a reputation for fairness and sharp instincts. From the moment he saw the case, he believed in my innocence. Cruz explained every step of the legal process, what to expect during questioning, and how to protect myself. For the first time, I felt like I had an ally who understood the stakes. Even with legal guidance, the hardest part was facing my parents. They still refused to believe me, insisting Lila was honest. Every word they said felt like a knife in my chest. I wanted to shout, to make them see the truth, but I knew that yelling wouldn't help. The betrayal cut deeper than the accusations themselves. Quietly, I began organizing my defense. I reviewed the evidence Moss and I had collected, documenting everything carefully. Every receipt, message, and observation became a tool in building a case that could finally expose Lila's lies. I realized patience and preparation were my only paths to proving the truth. The sting of my family siding against me fueled my determination. I wasn't just defending myself legally, I was reclaiming my dignity and standing up against someone who had tried to ruin my life. Lila's scheme was cruel, but I would outsmart her. I promised myself that I would not just survive this ordeal, I would turn it around and make sure the truth finally came to light. I realized that waiting for the right moment was crucial. One wrong move could destroy any chance of proving Lila's deceit. I spent days analyzing her routines, noting when she was careless, what she trusted, and where she felt invincible. Every detail became part of a larger plan. I decided to set a trap. I created a scenario where she might attempt another manipulation, arranging it so a neutral witness could see everything unfold. I didn't tell anyone at home, I had learned by now that secrecy was my only protection. The suspense was unbearable, but I stayed focused, knowing that patience would be my ally. Using my understanding of her weaknesses, I planted subtle hints that something she wanted would be within reach. I knew she couldn't resist testing her luck, and I predicted exactly how she would react. Every move I made was calculated, every step deliberate. I rehearsed in my mind how it would play out, preparing for every possible excuse or denial she could throw at the witness. I couldn't allow any surprises. If Lila sensed she was being watched, she might cover her tracks and ruin everything. The day of the setup, my heart raced. I watched quietly from a distance, careful not to reveal myself. The tension built with every passing minute. I had to be patient. One slip-up would ruin me forever. Finally, Lila took the bait. She acted exactly as I had predicted, exposing her own deceit in front of the witness. The proof I needed was captured clearly, undeniable. In that moment, I felt a mix of relief and satisfaction. The trap worked perfectly, and I could finally see a path toward clearing my name and reclaiming control over my life. The moment finally arrived. I held the folder of evidence carefully in my hands, my chest tight with nerves. Lila entered the room, acting casual, unaware of what awaited her. I took a deep breath and laid out every piece of proof, receipts, messages, and footage showing her scheming. At first, she laughed, brushing it off with practiced ease. "This doesn't prove anything," she said, her voice calm but tense. I stayed silent, letting the evidence speak for itself. Slowly, cracks began to show in her composure. Her eyes flickered, her hands trembled, and the confident facade started to crumble. A neutral witness I had arranged, someone who had seen parts of her actions without knowing I was involved, confirmed the details. Every denial Lila made was met with facts she could not refute. The room grew heavy with tension. Then my parents stepped in, their expressions shifting from doubt to shock. The reality hit them hard. They saw the truth laid bare, and the trust they had blindly placed in Lila shattered. Watching them process it was a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief because my innocence was finally recognized, sorrow because of the betrayal that had gone unnoticed for so long. I looked at Lila, whose face now reflected panic and guilt. She realized the game was over. There was no more hiding, no more lies to weave. I felt a quiet satisfaction, tempered by the sadness of how far she had gone to manipulate the people I loved most. In that moment, I understood the power of patience and careful planning. The confrontation wasn't just about exposing Lila, it was about reclaiming control of my life and finally showing everyone the truth. The battle was over, and justice had its first real victory. After the confrontation, I worked with Cruz to finalize the legal side. Every piece of evidence was submitted carefully, and the case was reviewed thoroughly. A few tense days later, I received the news: all charges against me were dropped. Relief washed over me like I hadn't felt in months. I was free, my record cleared, and my name finally restored. Lila couldn't escape the consequences. The court saw her actions as deliberate manipulation, and she was ordered to attend family counseling sessions and complete community service. The judge made it clear that lying and framing a sibling was unacceptable. It was a small measure, but it held her accountable in a way she couldn't ignore. My parents, Harold and June, were forced to face their own mistakes. They began questioning why they had believed her without asking for my side. Guilt was visible in their expressions, and I could tell they were struggling to reconcile their love for Lila with the reality of her betrayal. It wasn't easy for them to accept, but I could see that slowly, they were beginning to understand the damage their blind trust had caused. Though the legal battle was over, the emotional healing was just beginning. The victory didn't erase the months of stress, isolation, and pain I had endured, but it gave me validation. I had survived the storm, and I had the evidence and the law on my side. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of closure. Lila faced her reckoning, my reputation was intact, and my parents were starting to realize the truth. Justice had been served, and I could finally start thinking about moving forward without fear of false accusations hanging over me. I knew revenge didn't have to be loud to be effective. Instead of confronting Lila directly, I chose a subtler approach. I began sharing the evidence of her manipulations with relatives who had no idea what had been happening. I presented the facts calmly and clearly, without exaggeration, letting the truth speak for itself. Slowly, the ripple effects started. Family members who had once admired her began questioning her actions. Lila's credibility within the extended family and among distant cousins began to crumble. Invitations she once took for granted were now withheld, and people she had relied on for support started keeping their distance. I also ensured that her influence over family-controlled matters, like shared assets and minor inheritance decisions, was reviewed by neutral parties. Decisions she had hoped to sway in her favor were blocked by others who now understood her manipulative nature. She realized too late that her schemes had isolated her from opportunities and relationships she had assumed were secure. Throughout this, I remained measured. I didn't gloat or seek revenge out of anger. Every step was precise, calculated, and justified. The subtlety made it even more effective. Lila couldn't claim she was attacked unfairly, and the exposure of her own actions did the work for me. Watching her struggle with her new reality gave me a sense of quiet satisfaction. She was still part of the family, but her influence, pride, and social standing had been diminished. She had learned, indirectly, that manipulation carries consequences, even when no one confronts you directly. I felt a sense of balance restored. Justice had been delivered cleverly, without cruelty, and I had finally ensured that the damage she caused wouldn't be repeated. After the legal battles and subtle revenge, I realized it was time to focus on healing. I approached my parents slowly, knowing that trust had been broken and couldn't be restored overnight. Conversations were cautious at first, polite but deliberate, as we navigated old misunderstandings and unspoken guilt. Harold and June were hesitant, still grappling with the consequences of believing Lila over me. I listened to their apologies without rushing, letting them understand that rebuilding relationships required patience from all sides. Slowly, small gestures, sharing meals, discussing daily life, even simple phone calls, began to repair the distance that had grown between us. At the same time, I established firm boundaries with Lila. Contact was limited to unavoidable family events, and I made it clear she could no longer manipulate conversations or situations. I kept my interactions brief and controlled, ensuring she couldn't create tension or play games with my life again. This process wasn't easy. Old emotions surfaced, memories of betrayal and fear lingered. But with every boundary enforced and every honest conversation with my parents, I felt stronger. I was no longer a passive participant in my family's dynamics, I had regained control. Eventually, I reached a place of emotional closure. I didn't need to fight every battle, argue every point, or dwell on past hurt. I had survived, protected myself, and ensured justice was done. I could finally focus on my own life without fear or resentment dictating my actions. The healing wasn't instant, but it was real. I felt empowered, independent, and ready to move forward. I had reclaimed my dignity and learned that even the deepest wounds can be healed when approached with patience, courage, and careful thought. After months of rebuilding my life, I decided to start completely fresh. I moved to a new city, far from the reminders of betrayal and pain. The change was invigorating. I found a small studio where I could launch my own business, something I had always dreamed of but never had the courage to pursue. Every morning I worked on my project, pouring energy into something that was entirely mine. It wasn't easy at first, long hours, setbacks, and doubts, but the independence was exhilarating. I began to feel a sense of pride I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, my accomplishments were for me alone, and I didn't need anyone else's approval to feel worthy. Living on my own taught me discipline, patience, and resilience. I realized that betrayal hurts deeply, but surviving it builds a strength that can't be taken away. I no longer needed validation from family or anyone who had doubted me. My self-respect became my shield, and my determination became my engine for growth. Occasionally, I thought of Lila, and I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that the truth had already caught up with her. I didn't need to gloat, the lessons she learned at the hands of her own actions were enough. The freedom and control I had regained were far more powerful than any revenge I could have imposed. Looking forward, I felt hope and clarity. Life was no longer dictated by others' lies or manipulation. I had survived the worst, reclaimed my dignity, and discovered the strength within myself. Betrayal had tested me, but emerging stronger proved that I was capable of handling whatever challenges lay ahead. This new chapter was mine entirely, filled with opportunity, peace, and the quiet triumph of finally being free.